Okay, everybody. We are here with Dr. Roseann. And if, first of all, if you have children, and if you have children who are stressed, anxious, have any mental health potential issue of any kind, she is the world's leading expert. So I just wanted to introduce you to her and get to know her a little bit better. So welcome, Dr. Roseann.
Well, thank you, Dr. Debbie, for that loving intro. And you know how serious I am about kids' mental health. And you are a mom of 4 kids. So
Yes,
who are lovely adults at this point. But kids raising kids has become harder. And I think the pandemic really has, challenged kids, their parents, employment, every aspect related to families. There's a trickle effect. And I created this awesome podcast that's going to be okay with Dr. Roseann to really be a lifeline for parents when their kid has behavioral or mental health issues, because there aren't a lot of great resources for parents. And I don't want people Googling at 2 a.m. And looking. I want them to be able to say, hey, Dr. Rowe has been doing this for 3 decades and I need a trusted resource. And that's what I want to be for people so that they don't feel so hopeless and alone.
It's so important. And here's the thing too, my audience is they're dealing with shattered trust, betrayal. Clearly, they are stressed as it is. Let's talk about what happens when here you're so stressed, you have so much going on, you still have to work, you still have to raise your kids. And now there's this additional stressor of challenges with your kids. Where do you
And
start?
that's the more common reality, just so everybody knows. A lot of times, it's not that you're causing your child's issues, it's just that everybody is dealing with clinical issues at this point. It's like, when it comes to mental health, it doesn't know a difference, in terms of economics, gender, any factor in a person. It just doesn't know a difference. When it hits, it hits. And then it's the question, what do you do about it? Well, for parents are very overwhelmed. Human beings are very overwhelmed. And then you deal with things like betrayal and trauma. And it's even more so because your nervous system is activated. If you haven't done your work to deal with your stuff, your nervous system's just going to be a lot more activated, and it will feel harder to have patience for your child, to reinforce the desired behaviors, to not run in and rescue them and accommodate their issues, right? And that's a technical term. It's not enabling. Accommodation occurs when we inadvertently reinforce behaviors like anxiety or obsessions and compulsions by overly reassuring or allowing a child to avoid things uncomfortably. And it's not as clear cut and easy as that. That's when you really, if your child is really struggling with those things, you get mental health support. But when you're
And you know what,
struggling,
Dr.
yeah,
Rose, before we even go on, can you
yeah.
explain that a little bit? Because I want to, if you can give an example, so
Yeah.
everybody
Oh,
knows
yeah.
what that
So
looks like.
it's called accommodative behaviors, and being somebody that I specialize, one of the areas of specialty is OCD and of course anxiety. What happens is, this is a great example. This is a true story. So somebody shared with me this past week. They're like, I think my kid has OCD, and they sent me a tape. Okay. And she's like, he's very anxious. I don't know if it's OCD. I don't know if it's anxiety. I was like, send me the tape. Let me hear it. And he had a particular worry about thunderstorms. And his mom was reasoning with him, because when you have anxiety and OCD, it's a disorder of thinking. It's not a disorder of feeling. You are overthinking, you're looping, your thoughts may or may not be rational, but they definitely are based in fear and worry, right? So he had all these worries. And at the end, she did a really good job trying to manage it, right? She was like, do you think our house is going to burn down from the thunder? And he was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, why don't you sit with that a minute? Right? Versus like saying it's not going to burn down. Right. So she put it back on him to learn to be a little uncomfortable, right, about it and whatnot, and she was like, okay, there was a fire from a thunder, right, thunderbolt. And what happened? Did we get out? Yes. So there was a bit of a reality in that. And that's a more extreme example, but kids seek reassurance all the time. And we're always trying to rescue our kids because we don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But what happens is growth, mental health growth, resilience, and grit comes from the micro uncomfortable moments in life. So when kids go, okay, they didn't have the sneakers I want. Okay. And you're like, yeah, wow, that's a bummer, And the kid might get upset and it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do next? And it's those little moments when somebody is struggling, everyone always thinks it's the big thing. It's the little things that help us to learn skills, regulate our nervous system. And you know that as a mom of four, right?
For sure. Now, I can see that on one level, you wanna kind of minimize it because you think, "Well, if I minimize it, they will too." But then there's that if you minimize it, I imagine that, your child just wants to prove, "No, no, no, it's not a little thing, it's a big thing," and it makes it even bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah. So that's a balance, right? In that conversation. So, in this case, this was a child that had been spinning on it. So it wasn't the first conversation, right?
Mhm.
So a first conversation, you're like, wow, this is a big worry. What's going on? Where is this coming from? Right. And try to get underneath it a little. Obviously these are opportunities. We never be like, that's dumb. Not that parents do that, but sometimes we can be flip, right? Because we're living busy lives. But, if it's coming up repeatedly, oh, there's a worry there, right? There's something more about it, right? We have to look at it. A one off could be a window into the worry that's deeper, right? Like a rabbit hole, but it might just be a genuine conversation. And you want to find out like where is this coming from? Have you been thinking about this a while? And kids are surprisingly open when you ask the right questions. Don't you feel like that way, Dr. Deb?
Yeah, definitely, and I can see, where it is this fine line, like, I don't remember which child, maybe it was more than one, afraid of monsters, they were young, afraid
Yes.
of monsters, and what I did was I had a spray bottle, and I filled it with water, and I put a a a label on that said monster spray. And every night I would spray, and I was like, "All right, we're all good." Now, something like that, is that minimizing? Is that not really dealing with it,
Well,
or
so that's a normal developmental concern, right? So all kids go through a period, most kids, right? Probably 70% or more have a concern that there's some kind of monster. And usually you challenge it and say, well, let's check under the bed. And help. But then some kids, it really becomes a spinning. What I would probably do is say, did you get your monster spray out? And
Mhm.
I'm really about autonomous supportive parenting, where we push back on the kids. We give them the tools, the resources. We do a lot of love, a lot of positive reinforcement, but you really stretch your kids to kind of get out there and, experience a little discomfort, a little failure, because that's how they learn, right? They don't learn. We all know when we're like, telling our kids the same thing 100 times, they're not going to learn. Let them go out there and experience it. Oh,
You
they'll
know
learn real fast.
I'll tell you, I'll never forget this. There was one of my kids, and they had, like, violin lessons, whatever, and they would every Monday, they had to bring that violin in, and they would forget, and then I would go racing to school, and I remember saying, "They're never gonna learn if I keep doing that." So I reminded them, "Make sure you bring it, make sure you bring it, make sure you bring it," and sure enough, there goes Monday morning, they left, violin's still there, I'm like, I can't bring it in." Lesson learned, so it's one of those painful things, but
Oh,
yes,
we're
it
more of a wreck about it than they are. We feel like a terrible parent.
of
But, today kids have a lot of worries. They have a lot of anxiety. And every parent needs tools in their back pocket because these conversations come up and we may not recognize them. A lot of my parents, they come to me and it's like, oh, I feel so bad for them because they're like, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm so terrible. And I'm like, stop. We don't do that. You're here, but they can only connect the dots when they look back, right? And so they are like, this was the sign. this was that, you know? So, and the same boy where the mom was having the conversation about the thunderstorms, right? Something real had happened and it started to spiral into obsessive thinking. At the very end of the tape, he said he got her because he said, "Oh, is it all right if I close my blinds?" And she
Mhm.
was like, "Yeah." And I go, "Oh, you just fed right into his worry because he needed you to reassure." And it is, to his case, is turning into OCD. That's what's happening, right? It becomes this, he's needing a lot of support over something real that happened, and then it turns into something irrational. And with anxiety and OCD, we don't, it's so internal. And you don't know until it's like, whew, it's a fire,
Right.
and
So
that's
what
what I see all the time.
Yeah, what are you noticing over the last couple of years, just in the times we're in?
Wow. I mean, I am seeing a lot of crisis mental
Mhm.
health, like, suicidal ideation, OCD, anxiety, depression at very high levels, like where maybe there was none before, but there might have more typically been low levels and then explosions. And then parents just being like, wow, I don't know what to do. I see a lot of school refusal. I've always done a lot of school refusal support for both students, or I should say, not both students, parents, and school systems, doing trainings and whatnot on that. And I just can't believe how common it is. It's almost like probably 50% of the people I work with all over the United States, my cases are related to school refusal. It becomes the I'm done, like the shutdown. But I think, we are having open conversations about mental health, but we're not really teaching people about what they can actually do practically. We're like, go to a therapist.
Mm,
Well, sometimes I have people waiting 10 months, not with me, but in other places in other areas of the country. It's just not so easy. And parents don't understand that therapy is really an opportunity for the whole family to learn. Like you had started the question, like, your people that you're following, you have a lot of people with trauma and betrayal, and it's not fun and it's not pretty.
mhm.
And one of the biggest things we know is that if you are more regulated as a parent, your child is going to be more regulated even if they're distressed. It's called co-regulation. And I always say that's why you got to share your calm. And so when your child is distressed, of course it's going to be upsetting. Of course there's an overwhelm, but it's an opportunity to take care of yourself too. Because the better you take care of yourself, your nervous system is going to regulate more, your child will regulate, but your child will learn from you. And
Right.
that has something, it's so important, right? Like, my kids watch everything I say
Oh,
and do,
sure.
you know?
And even more than trauma, even just a lack of sleep, you
Oh,
can really parent the way you want to.
no.
Tell us about the podcast, and because I'm picturing all these parents that are just struggling
Yeah.
so much, and here's an amazing resource. If you cannot go, to directly see Dr. Roseann, how can they get a hold of
Well,
you?
and that's part of why I did this, because people literally, sometimes 100 people a day contact us. And
Mhm.
so, I know that not everybody can afford or have the ability to hop on an airplane and, come to us and whatnot. So this podcast is designed for overwhelmed parents, parents that either it's wherever they are in their mental health journey, behavioral journey with their child, autism, anxiety, learning disabilities, pans, pandas, heavy duty stuff too. And it's short, it's actionable episodes, right? So my episodes are generally under 15 minutes. And we also are going to highlight every week a parent who has used different science-backed natural solutions, right? Because this is about solutions that parents can use themselves. So there's definitely a focus on education. I'm like been told I'm a walking encyclopedia about kids' mental health. And I want people to have accurate information, but I also want them to have really concrete tools, just like in this conversation. If one person hears it and they're like, oh, I recognize that I am accommodating and there's actually something I can do. And in that accommodation process, there's a whole neurological component in the brain. It's called a negative reinforcement cycle. So there's a reason why we don't do that And an ability for parents to take those steps. So short actionable episodes were for 5 weeks, where we have an episode every day for five times a week for 5 weeks. And then we will be multiple times a week. And, it's an opportunity for people to binge listen. And I also do series on topics. So you can say, hey, I want to listen to just the ADD episodes, just the OCD episodes, whatever it is. And I love parents are already messaging me on episodes they want. So it's really my gift. And I want people to, know that they're not alone, that there is hope and there's a path.
Mhm.
And that's what this whole, journey is all about for
Tell us
me.
the name.
So it's called It's Gonna Be Okay with Dr. Roseann. So, and I tell everybody I work with, it's gonna be okay. And that's where my book came from. That's where this podcast came from. I also own the trademark to It's Gonna Be Okay.
Yeah, it's
In
a real
the URL.
that knows it's gonna be okay. And also,
Yeah.
anybody who has ideas for shows that you want Dr. Roseann to
Yeah.
cover, message me as well, and I'll pass it along.
Drop it in here, and I just don't want parents to feel alone, and every kid will go through something. They're right, Dr. Debbie, mother of four.
100 billion%.
And like, it doesn't matter, there's just going to be a time where something happens. Even our, easy to parent kid, like there's going to be a moment and you're going to be like, what do I do? And so it's better to really have information. And every kid today is experiencing high levels of stress. They really are. And more than I've ever seen in my entire career. And also I see probably more stressed out parents. I don't think they knew. When we sign up for parenting, we don't know what it is.
No way. There's no manual. We do the best we
No,
can and clean
no.
up the damage we do.
Mm-mm. And this pandemic's just been really hard on
Yeah.
people. I mean, we talk about it all the time, how hard it's
Mhm.
been. And yet I see people seeking help. So I think that's one of the best things I've seen in the pandemic are people are like, hey, wait, I had this betrayal happen to me. I need to have help. I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah.
Coming up into my mind 3 times a day or whatever
Right.
it is, right?
And for those who've been betrayed, no, way more than that, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Dr. Roseann, I wanna thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you, Dr. Debbie.
Everybody, it's gonna be okay. Be sure to, listen to this podcast. You are listening right now and watching the world's most, just incredible human being and leading expert on children's mental
Oh, thank you, Dr. Debbie. I love you. But yes, so thank you for your support and always, Dr. Debbie's been behind the scenes and I've been working on this for a year and a half. So thank you everybody. Wherever you are on your journey is exactly where you need to be. You just need to take one step. That's it.
Perfect.